is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand. His oath is covenant and blood supports me in the whelming flood. When all around my soul gives way, he then is all my hope and stay. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all
Just wanted to communicate. Sunday a week ago, I had requested prayer for our time in Paris, Tennessee, and just want to thank you for prayers that were offered on our behalf. It felt like it was a weekend where the presence of the Lord was felt. I don't know the long-term results, but just thank you for prayers that were offered on David's and in our behalf, and for the church at Calvary. Are there others?
All right. Well, I would say let's just cluster for prayers here, for a little prayer time here. And if there are any prayer requests that should be shared to the whole group, by all means do so. Otherwise, you can just, any others that you want to share in your small groups, then you may do as well. Does anybody have some that they'd like to share? Paul has one over here. Go ahead.
Most of you might know that, but Mrs. Id Yoder from Huntsville, Tennessee, Lois Yoder, has a number of malignant tumors in her brain. She had surgery for it. The prognosis doesn't look well at all, so pray for them and the family.
Yeah. You said Lois? Lois Yoder, wife of Ed. At Huntsville has cancer, and it's not looking hopeful. Okay, let's just spend 5 to 7 minutes here in prayer, and Bo, I'll let you lead a song at the end of that. That's all right.
Shane told me these are all my good friends, and I'm just going to have to remember that. I am feeling just a little bit like a fish out of water. I really don't like the idea of women leading out in the church, so I'm not preaching to you tonight. But I am passionate about just embracing motherhood, and if the Lord chooses to give you children, and I want to be willing to share a testimony for the Lord. A few things do give me pause. Number one, I really don't want to come across as feeling like I know all the answers. Number two, and that time has kind of glossed over the reality of what it was like when I had all little children. Is this? Really? Okay. And I also have children of my own sitting here, and they kind of know me really well as the mom I am. So, and I'm also aware that some of you might have heard some of this stuff before, and I'm a little sensitive about that, but just please have patience if that's the case. And contrary to what some of you younger ones may think, I have not always been a mom. I've not always been a minister's wife. But I want to give you just a little bit of a glimpse of some of the hats I have worn in the past. I grew up in this area, actually on the farm where we live. I was the third of 6 living children in the Ollie Troyer family. I went to Elrica grade school, Pilgrim High School, and I grew up on a farm. I was just a good little farm girl. We milked cows. I worked field with a 40-20 and swaths with a self-propelled Heston swather. We had picnics at harvest. We did gardening. We butchered chickens. We were just farmers. But I had almost no experience with little children. I had only one younger sister and then 2 younger brothers that were adopted when they were 2 and 3, so it wasn't like I took care of babies. Then, when I was 21, I went to Whiteville, Tennessee, and taught school for 9 years, but I had only older students. I didn't teach the little ones. And so there I had a new identity. I was now the teacher, and I lived in the teacher's trailer. They didn't know I was just Ollie's daughter, you know? I taught with 6 other gals during those years. I lived with 4 of them. I had very low financial compensation, but I had good connections with generous people, and I really enjoyed the work. It was a small church, small youth group. When I was 30, I quit teaching, spent a year in Plain City, Ohio with my Troyer grandparents, and I helped my 90-year-old grandpa take care of Grandma and my mentally handicapped uncle. I was also a cashier and a hostess at a restaurant that year. Dwight took my place in the classroom in Tennessee, and that's where we first met. After I'd been in Plain City for a year, I moved back to Tennessee after Grandpa died, and I bought my own place. And at 33, I got married. Dwight was 27. I was pretty independent, but I quit my work, and I loved being a homemaker without thinking about finances and oil changes and balancing the checkbook and all that kind of thing. Then we moved to Kansas just before our 4th child, Michael, was born in 2003 because Dwight was asked to teach at Pilgrim. And now, to answer some of the questions that the committee told me to discuss, what purpose do I find in my vocation? Finding purpose in life has to come from Christ or it won't last. Because life is always changing, and God doesn't. I've definitely found purpose in the vocations that God has given me, including motherhood, but it's really because of Him. So how do I find my current vocation purposeful and fulfilling? I'm making an eternal difference because I'm working with people, eternal souls. We're all interested in missions, but it doesn't have to be foreign missions. Our homes are one of the most important missions we can have. They just aren't one of those PowerPoint presentations. If I can focus beyond the daily cooking, cleaning, teaching, squabble setting as a means to an end, it helps to take care of that life is mundane feeling. So what is the role of joy in the work itself? There's a saying that says, I don't sing because I'm happy because I sing. And joy is usually a byproduct of our relationship to God, choosing to submit to Him and rest in Him. So what's the role of gifting, like natural versus developed ability? When I read this, I honestly laughed out loud, because if motherhood takes natural ability, I'd have struck out before I ever started. I always taught older students and was more comfortable with them. Although I enjoyed relating to toddlers, I just didn't have much chance to interact with them. And I always kind of bombed out in the kitchen. I'd have rather sewn for my sisters at home. They loved the kitchen. So that's kind of how we split it up. I always said, as I passed through my 20s and into my 30s, more than half seriously, that I couldn't even get married because I could never cook for a family 3 times a day. That just looked huge to me. Well, we were absolutely delighted when God chose to bless our home with children, but it was a real learning curve for me. Sorry, Anthony. Your birth just did not excite those warm, fuzzy feelings that my grandma Troyer said you just had after a birth. It was more like, well, it's about time. And when Dwight, who's just a natural daddy if there ever was one, went back to work again after Anthony's birth, I about had a panic attack because I was like, I have to take care of this baby all by myself all day. So it was not natural for me at all. And I don't know when I started, but it feels like my life verse has become, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. He gives to all men liberally. So what's the role of sacrifice or financial compensation in the vocation? Thinking of sacrifice, Romans 12 talks about us presenting our bodies a living sacrifice. So I think that's supposed to be a part of the life of every child of God. Yes, motherhood takes sacrifice, sometimes huge amounts, but it's also loaded with rewards, and it's not a thankless task, even though it does seem that way some days. What about financial compensation? Well, money never really has meant much to me. I taught school in Tennessee not because it was paying so well, but I felt I was called to it. I loved it. I saw it as a valuable investment in people, rather than because it did so well in dollars and cents. I tended to choose my jobs for the spiritual investment over finances, but it felt like the Lord honored those choices by compensating in a lot of other ways. When we got married, I was, partly of necessity, pretty independent. But it was an amazing gift to me to be able to be a homemaker not have to think about going off to work for a paycheck. I was delighted to be able to do things at home, in the community, in the church that I'd never been able to do when I had a full-time job. Dwight didn't necessarily have a huge income, but I was very happy to let him provide for us financially. I felt cared for. I was content. Children, even young ones, do take money to provide for. But I felt like it was my responsibility to accept the challenge of creatively helping to make the money reach while staying at home with them. So what are some of the struggles I have had or have currently with finding peace and fulfillment? What are some challenges I've navigated? And there again, I just think if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. That's just been such a gift for me. One of the big challenges when I had a lot of littles was I just felt like I had no time with God personally. It was, as a single, I would spend all the time I wanted with the Lord, but, well, when the baby wakes you early and then the children all come piling out, where are you supposed to take your time? So I started taking my time with God by singing hymns when I was rocking my babies. And that was just my connection with God, and I would sing all the verses I could think of with each hymn. And then after several years, suddenly I was like, wait, where do our children learn all those hymns? They just sing them. And when it hit me what had happened, I just started crying. I was like, wait, I was doing this for my benefit. I wasn't even thinking of the children. But that's what they heard, whether they were before they were born or after they were born. As I was rocking, I was singing. And so it ended up being, I think it benefited them just as much as it did me. But that was my connection with the Lord during those days a lot. And also, if I would find verses or quotes that would mean a lot to me, I would write them on a piece of paper and then post them where I would see them around the kitchen sink or the bathroom or somewhere where I'd see them. And just, that was food for thought for me. Another frustration during those years was, how do you have creative dates with your husband when there's not much money? So we had some interesting ways to fill that. One was what we call our bean patch dates. When we had the potluck, our children didn't enjoy picking beans. We didn't mind it. So we would go out there and we'd pick beans by the hour, and the children stayed way far away. And there was no danger of little ears hearing anything we wanted to talk about. So they became our bean patch dates. We'd often just pack up things and go for a little picnic. It doesn't take much to put your supper into a basket and throw a picnic blanket in the car and go. And some of these were done with the children, some by ourselves. We did a lot of exploratory drives with the children especially, just drive way out back roads and explore the countryside. Sometimes when I wanted a special meal for the family, I would use the nice china and make it a special time. It didn't have to go out to eat. You didn't spend any more money. It was just setting the table nicely. And a few times we went to Joe's cabin, got a babysitter for the evening, and we didn't spend any money there, and we had a delightful place. Talk about ambiance, it's there. So what were some ways that I could express my creative or artistic self while I was in the middle of childbearing? One thing, and this was an idea I got from somebody else, make dusting mitts out of some soft cloth, old diapers or something, and then decorate them for each child. And so they thought this was sporty to put the little mitts on their hands, and go do the dusting for me. That was wonderful. So that was fun to do that. And I also taught them just simple embroidery that enabled them to make little quilts of their own. Then they burned. Sorry, that was just hard to see that happen. But when I thought of it, that they were gone, I thought, you know what? It filled the purpose it was supposed to at the time. It gave them something productive to do and taught them skills. Something that was, sometimes we would just ask for advice from random people on certain stuff. And this was very helpful to learn from other people. I remember talking to Ron and Brenda and finding out what they did for finances for their growing children. How did you handle money they made and that kind of thing? And it was just very helpful to hear how they dealt with that. I remember talking to my friend Marietta in Tennessee when our 2 children were, the 2 oldest would have been there, and I was just thinking, well, it's about time to get some pretzels around for Anthony or something to keep him happy in church. She said, why? And I said, because you've got to do something. She said, you know what? If you have food, you've got to have water. I said, yeah. She said, you know what? They actually do a lot better in church if you don't give them food and if you don't have a whole diaper bag full of toys. And I said, okay. So we decided to try it. And you can raise 6 children with no food in church and just a book or a toy for your diaper bag. It works. And as they get older, you can give them a paper and pencil or pen and let them draw. It's very quiet. It doesn't distract anybody else. And they learn to hold still in church. I got more out of it that way. That was a blessing to me that we were able to hear that from somebody else. I remember David and Susanna visiting us in Tennessee, and we asked, I don't know what their conversation was, but David said, when your children ask questions, listen to those questions and answer them. Affirm them. Don't just pass it off like, oh, they're just spouting all the time, And that was helpful and I tried often to think, I often thought of that. My Aunt Mary Beachy from Kelowna had a row of little ones, and so we were talking one day, and she said something she did to try to focus on the child instead of just this group of children was when they had a birthday, make it special for them. Doesn't have to take much. Just make so that child knows that day they are the focus for the family. And she said, pray often for your children, for each child. And that was very helpful for me too. I remember when we were talking about school, talked to Miri Miwashige, and she helped me navigate the logistics of homeschooling with a bunch of preschoolers, and that helped a lot too. So what happens when you are stretched thin with a lot of responsibility? One thing I did was to delegate jobs to the children pretty young, but I needed help pretty desperately, and it took the edge off my perfectionism. Yeah, just doesn't happen like it does when you do it yourself. Sometimes the time it took to teach them to do a job seemed counterproductive, like, oh, I could do this so much faster just by myself. But in the end, it paid off. And I remember reading around that time, if you wait to teach a child to do something until they're old enough to do it well, it's too late. They won't want to do it anymore. So we endured lots of splashing at the kitchen sink and that kind of thing while they learned to wash dishes. They learned to count by setting the table. I moved the dishes down to the drawers so they could reach the dishes, so they could do more of the work in setting the table and putting the dishes away. I came up with schedules for jobs and dishwashing. And I also had assigned one child a day in the kitchen. Well, with 6 children, it worked out pretty well to have Anthony on Monday, Cindy on Tuesday, you know. That way I knew who to ask for help, and it gave me one-on-one time with them in the kitchen. It gave me a chance to teach them all how to read a recipe and make something with food. And eventually that child was on, that they were responsible to get breakfast on for when we were having school. It was that child got all the tables set and breakfast on for everybody, so I could keep on going with school. I also accepted proffered help. Oren Joe, was such a blessing to me when I had a row of little ones. She came one night after church. She said, "Karen, would it help you if I would let one of my girls come over for a half day a week?" And I said, "Are you kidding? That'd be wonderful." So Angela came over, I don't know how many years. She came every Thursday morning, and she helped clean my house. And it was such a gift to me. Joe didn't want anything for it. She said no. But she said, do think about when your girls are that age, that maybe you could share them with others in the community at that stage. Let's keep this thing going. And I said, you're on. I like that idea. So, and my girls learned a lot by doing that. I know there were days that I felt like I hadn't accomplished anything until my husband asked me, "So what did you do?" So, well, you know, it didn't feel like anything when I was trying to be productive, but there was a lot that I was doing that I just didn't catch on. He was very affirming to me during that time. Sometimes I would compare myself with other moms and their children, and you know, like, you know, I'd always come out on the short end of the stick. But I had to realize that each family and each situation is unique. There are unique dynamics for everything. And if somebody said, "Oh, they had all their children potty trained by the time they were 2," I was like, good for you. I didn't. It was just not my thing. So that comparison thing can be kind of a robber of joy. Another thing I did was, and this I would encourage any parents with little ones to do, just enjoy the little funny or the smart things they say. Write it down. It is just so much fun later to go back. And this is one I remember, and I'm not trying to pick on you, Anthony, but I know when he was 3, we were living in Tennessee. We'd come back to Kansas for a reunion, and Mom and Dad's house was full, so we stayed at Aunt Lizzie's. And sitting there in the living room one night, and Dwayne and Leroy were home for Thanksgiving right then. And, you know, they were both college graduates, and here's this little 3-year-old conversing in Dutch with them. And they were talking about this little wooden camel over on Aunt Lizzie's bookcase. And then Anthony said, "Well, actually, it's a dromedary because it has only one hump." And Dwayne and Leroy looked at each other like, hello? And I kind of felt a little smug. He just learned it from some books we were reading to him. I don't know how it happened, but anyway, I just remember that time. And laugh with your children, not at them when they are small. Sometimes I was bewildered about the sheer volume of decisions to be made. And I've learned you can come to God about anything and just say, "I need your help. I need ideas." Maybe it's meals and menus. Maybe it's rearranging the furniture again in a small space. This was what I dealt with a lot when we lived in the trailer. Maybe it's just priorities and how you spend your time. Come to Him with the children's problems. If they lose a toy, it was, you know, just, well, let's pray about it. Let's tell the Lord we've lost the toy. See if we can, you know, He knows where it is. Sometimes it's relationship issues with the children that we need to come to him about. In conclusion, motherhood has not always been easy for me, and I know I haven't done anything that was harder work or been more humbling, but there's also not been anything that's been more rewarding. It's good to remember that each stage is the best yet. And now I'm facing the challenge of adult children going out on their own, and I need to remember that this is the best yet. Thankfully, like I said earlier, God doesn't change, and he's still there for me, just like he's always been.
Redemption and grace for this whole congregation as knowledge of sin. We need thee for brightness within. Thank you, Bo, and thank you, Karen. There's some overlap, but there's also what I am thinking about is kind of a different direction in some ways than what Karen went. I went a little light on personal experience, actually. But I have to say that I think probably most of the things I'm saying come out of experience. And I should just also say there are plenty of reasons why I shouldn't have accepted this assignment, including the fact that there were that many of you. Well, okay. You have more opportunities to hear from me than you do from some of the rest of you, and you could have been up here talking about this too. But I have to say that the reason I did accept was because I can get kind of passionate about this idea. If my children were here, they'd be thinking, yeah, like about 100 other things. So just warning here, if it sounds like I'm on a soapbox tonight, maybe it is, I don't know. All right, same questions that the committee gave Karen and Marvin and Marietta are the ones I'm going to be talking about here. The first two, I'm going to kind of group these together rather than, well, I don't have time to answer each of them individually. So the question about how I think about vocation and purpose and how I see my current vocation as being purposeful and fulfilling, I'm adding to that what is the role of financial compensation in choosing a vocational path. Here's a quote from a Milton Friedman. How many of you recognize that name, Milton Friedman? Okay. He was an economist, 50s, 60s, 70s. I can't remember exactly when he started and stopped, but roughly that. Here is the statement that he made. What happened? Am I getting it here? Oh, maybe I should turn things on here. No, it's on. Well, if you have to forward it there, back there, I guess you can probably. Sorry, I wanted to show it to you. I don't have to show it to you. There we go. There is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say, engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud. Now, this is a brilliant economist who influenced a generation or two in the US very significantly. Now, this is talking about business, but is there any fundamental difference between the way we view business and the way we view our vocation? Do we have any reason to think that Friedman would have said anything different about the purpose for a person's vocation? I'll let you just actually turn to your neighbor here for a minute and discuss that, and then I'll take a little bit of feedback. Vocation, business, any reason to think of them differently if we're talking about this kind of thing? Go ahead and turn and talk. All right, I'd like to hear from you. What are your first thoughts on this? Either on the quote itself or on the idea, can we apply this to vocation as much as we can to business? How does this apply to motherhood? Well, that's a problem. So not every vocation, obviously. Okay, maybe we should simplify it and talk about jobs. You can respond to that or any other thing. Yes, go ahead.
I was just trying to figure out what the primary question.
No, I'm interested in just some reaction from you here.
What is this profit?
Money, making money in the business makes money. Paul.
Would it be the same thing as saying it's the main thing to get a job, to have a vocation, is to make money?
Okay.
Is that what he's
I would imagine that he would say that. I don't think that's inconsistent with the way I know Friedman. Well, I'm not saying that Friedman never said anything I would agree with, but on this point, I probably could not be more opposed to his perspective. I view the role of revenue as nothing more than permission to play. Now, that needs some explanation. First of all, revenue for business is profits. A business has to be profitable to stay in the game. That's what I mean by permission to play. A nonprofit isn't that much different. It has to have revenue if it's going to stay alive. That revenue might come by charging for services it provides, like a school charging tuition. It might come from fundraising or establishing a donor base or whatever. But for nonprofits, an adequate revenue stream is simply permission to play. And I submit that the same holds true for any job that we have. It has to pay the bills. So, very unlike Friedman, I'd say that the role of revenue is simply the first box we check. It's not the only one, and it is not the one that should get our primary attention. In the words of Kevin Trapani, and I'd be happy to get you some of his material, not all profit is created equal. Profit that does social good is better. Now, he was addressing business specifically, but I say again, I can't see a significant difference between the way we think about business and the way we think about our jobs. Not all profit is created equal. Now, you're going to hear a lot of strong statements tonight. That's one of them. Go ahead and turn and talk again. I'd like to give you a chance to think this over and then give me some feedback. All right, feedback. What do you have to say about what I've just said here? You're saying the first question, I was basically just this section where I'm talking about profit not all being equal, or as Trapani would say it, profit that does social good is better. In other words, that does something of service to humankind. We'll keep going if there's nothing coming to the surface now. All right. Now, I'm going to flesh that out a little bit with some examples. If you lived in Colorado, you could make very good money raising and selling marijuana. It's completely legal. You could also make some money, but not nearly as much, by raising and selling produce. Is all profit created equal? Now let me get into a less comfortable comparison here. Some people can make a lot of money by playing the stock market just right. For example, a short seller makes money when the shares that he borrows shares and then sells them. He makes money when the price on those shares drops, and then he buys them again and returns the loan with fees and whatever else. Okay? It's legal. Since I'd like to keep my head for a while longer, I'm not gonna get into the ethics of this. It's legal. Okay. Now, compare that then with the kind of another kind of investing. A person who has limited credit and limited business experience, but who has a marketable skill. And he has a viable business plan. He comes to you and asks to borrow money so he can buy some equipment that he needs to keep his business going, or to take the next step in his business. If you lend him this money, you know that you will need to keep tabs on him. You'll have to help him make decisions. And, well, there are easier places to invest your money. Wouldn't you agree? Let me ask you, are these two investment opportunities that I gave you created equal? Or does one of them have the potential for doing a greater good? Now, we certainly need to consider other factors in all this, but I think that this statement by John Taft gets a lot closer to my understanding of what we're here for. Taft isn't technically an economist, but he's made his mark in the world of finance in a pretty big way. He's had leadership roles in finance and banking firms, and he's written prolifically. Here is a statement from one of his books. One's true purpose and the ultimate purpose of organizations and of our communities is to serve others. Now, I'm sure I wouldn't agree with plenty of things that Taft says, but on this point, I couldn't agree a lot more. And from the little of it I know, I seriously doubt whether he's a follower of Christ, but wouldn't you say this has a strangely biblical ring to it? And so my response to these first two questions is this. I would like to see us reclaim the original use of the word vocation. It comes from the Latin word vocatio, which means a call or summons. And the term actually originated in the Christian community. Whether we're in for-profit or non-profit work, our vocation must serve our mission, or else it's not our vocation. Of course, it has to make money. We have to pay the bills. But if our business or job choice doesn't align with God's calling on our lives, we're missing the mark. And I can say with confidence that God's calling on our lives is going to align with His purposes for the church and his plans for his kingdom. I'm making strong statements. I'm not trying to have the last word here. After exploring this particular point extensively with the economics class I taught last year, I ended our last day of class with a statement that went something like this: if you forget everything else that we've taught, that we've talked about in this class, here is what I hope for you. I hope if you ever get a job or start a business and someone asks you why you did it, and you answer with a shrug of your shoulders, oh, I don't know, it makes good money. If you ever say that, I hope you feel guilty. Now, I have one of my students sitting here right this evening. I'm curious if she would have remembered that. I'd say that to my children, and I think I'd be audacious enough to say that here to this crowd. All right, somebody brave, give me some feedback here, pushback or whatever you want. Adjust this to get closer to what you would have said.
How does this apply to decisions you make in vocation?
That's a good question. How does this apply to decisions I've made in terms of vocation? Well, all right, so my vocational track since I was 30 has been education for 9 years, and then most of you, a number of you know about this story, but because I burned out, I left education, thought I was done with it for good. I went into construction and then into worked for Golden Rule Travel for a couple of years, and then was asked to teach here again. So vocation since the time I was 30 has been more education than anything else. I guess I would say that it sounds a little obvious in this case that, of course, well, teaching in a Christian school or administering in a Christian school, that's obviously a calling, right? Yeah, I guess it is kind of obviously that. I don't think it should be that any less or any more than other jobs per se. But I think that's how we have chosen to think about this is a calling. Daryl.
What would be your advice to somebody who finds himself in a job that is not their vocation? Especially if putting food on the table is a pretty important part of why they hold the job.
I won't exactly answer that question in what I have coming up soon, but maybe I'll let you listen to that part, and then if you want more clarification, I'd be happy to give it. Yes, Eric.
Can you go back to the question you asked about this 7 minutes ago or so? You asked the question about, like, are there some vocations that are more, you might put words around noble, or
More what? More noble?
can you say that?
Well, basically, if it does social good, I said, are they all equal?
So I take a little bit of umbrage with that, because taken to the extreme, it just further accentuates the sacred and secular divide. Or when we start thinking about jobs kind of like, this is more noble, this is more sacred, I should be pursuing that even if my calling and gifting doesn't line up with that, instead of trying to see how this can integrate into kingdom work with the calling that I have. I mean, you kind of flesh it out later, but when you made that point, I was spinning and I wasn't comfortable.
All right. At first glance, Eric, would you say that making food for sale in Dillon's and wherever else, does that fall on the sacred or on the secular side of the divide?
Compared to school teaching, it's more secular.
That's why I said the school thing isn't quite fair. because everybody kind of sees that, right? Everybody sees that as a calling, right? I happen to know that you are working on developing recipes that are less harmful to our bodies.
I mean, everything I make's got sugar in it.
I said less harmful, right? Okay. Is that a social good?
It lines up with my values.
And your values are? There you have it. And the reason you want to get rid of vegetable oil is because?
Too much omega-6 in the body leads to inflammation.
Okay, and so it is problematic for health, right? Okay. Does anybody here have any trouble with designing foods or recipes that are more healthful as being a noble calling? Does that make my point?
Yeah, I think it does. It's just like at the Reach, Ellis had it, and I don't think it's here tonight because of the upcoming wedding, but his talk on vocation, I don't know there's much difference between the two, but really I think empowered those of us who are in business to see business as being more holistic and not feel guilty about it. Because it seems we can think of, again, taking it from a surface glance, things like teaching, nursing, whatever, as there's a noble mission. That's kind of where we go. And even kind of in other communities, permissive degrees are education, teaching, maybe music to some degree. But it's like we sort of frame it according to that, or we give it more value, probably subconsciously.
I'm glad you're asking this because if that was what I was communicating, I really did not mean to communicate that. That's why the teaching thing makes me a little uncomfortable because it's seen as one of those sacred tasks, right? But he was saying he's uncomfortable with talking about more noble and less noble vocations because the teaching and the nursing, the serving professions are noble, and just making money running a bakery is not so noble, or whatever. And I would argue that that is not the case. Yes.
Well, but there is a limit to that, isn't it? This is not judging. So Mark, I know he worked in RV factory. So what do you say here is a huge RV factory where the main purpose is to provide recreation vehicles for people. You put that on the same line as a bakery?
It was the least fulfilling job of my life.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to what Daryl made the comment that isn't it a vocation to provide for your family, even if it is not a socially good, I mean, most jobs provide something socially, right? But it isn't as noble maybe. But in working at the RV factory, he did provide for all of us, our 4 children, me, and put food on the table, even though it wasn't maybe a job that you would consider noble. So isn't it noble to provide for your family? And that is the social good, maybe, that we need to look at then.
So I'm wearing 3 hats right now, doing 3 vocations, as it were. And the noble one is mentoring with Hope Journey Guide. And then in between, I build chicken tractors, and then I inventory parts for the local trash hauling company. And what's the nobility in that? Well, when they gave a little bit of a questionnaire when I got there. They like to do a blurb for the new employees, and what will you be doing at the company? And I said, I'll be inventorying the parts so that the mechanics can keep the trucks on the road, so that the drivers can keep our customers looking good. So Niza Brothers is performing a social good. And when I get parts in and enter them into the computer so the bean counters can make sure we get everybody taken care of, and I put them where the mechanics will know where to find them, I'm part of that social good that is going on there. Plus, it's a fun job.
Brian had his hand up over here.
So looking at what you have on the screen, if our vocation must serve our mission, is it generally most important that we enter the correct vocation, or is it most important how we are in that vocation?
Fair question. Who wants to respond to that? Aaron, then Orrin.
Every job can put you right into your own mission field where you can have the chance to influence other people. So I'm thinking of responding there. Mark, maybe all he's doing is was building RVs, but gave him an opportunity to, I don't know how you interacted with your fellow coworkers, Mark. I think of myself, maybe all I'm doing is helping build or maintain networks for internet, but I do have a chance to work closely with other people on a daily basis, and I can use that it's a great responsibility to have that kind of interaction on a daily basis.
If I may steal the mic. So, could you clarify a little bit, Arlen, on the kinds of jobs that you consider social good? I would have taken your contrast there to be between jobs that in general benefit society in some way versus things that are a harm to society in some way. That's why you had the marijuana example. And I think another one that is a little more of a white-collar crime is credit card companies, and should you take the referral fees of getting someone else enslaved to them, or to get someone else to potentially give their money to the credit card company whose main profit is from ripping off vulnerable people?
Fair questions. Orrin. Maybe I'll just respond to Alvin a little bit. This is kind of in general what I'm referring to here. I am saying that there is no such thing as a valueless way of making money. And rather than drawing a line saying everything on this side is good, everything on this side is bad, I'm calling for us to think comparatively. Eric, I'm going to keep picking on him, could very well make more money by dumping more sugar into his products. You follow what I'm saying there? Yeah, there is nothing inherently unethical about working on an RV plant. Inherently, but I think it's fair to ask: is Mark doing more social good, rolling steel for buildings now than he was then? I'm not giving an answer. I'm saying it's fair to ask that, isn't it? Orrin had a comment. Go ahead, Orrin.
Well, how do we define vocation? Is a vocation and job isn't exactly one and the same. Now, so it says there, our vocation must serve our mission. Would we define vocation as what are we here for? I mean, it can be in many different ways, but our attitude and our reason for living should be that should speak to how we do whatever we're in. And the song that I keep hearing, because I played it one again, is if you want to be great in God's kingdom, learn to be the servant of all. That word serve just jumps right out at me right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So is it wrong to choose a job simply because it is financially profitable?
Okay, my first issue with the question is that you asked, is it wrong? How about we ask, is it right? And figure out what the question is that goes with that. I think we can kind of, the idea is that the way we frame the questions really kind of shapes the conversation. And I'm not trying to come up with a line here that says this is wrong and this is right. Yeah, obviously the marijuana example is wrong, no question about that. But I think we'd all agree to that. But there are lots of others that are not necessarily wrong, but are they the highest good that we could be doing given the context? Okay, and I will answer that question differently. If a guy is coming off the streets, coming out of prison, and he has a chance to drive for Hutchinson Beverage, I think that's, or City Beverage, wherever it is, called a place that sells alcoholic beverages, I'm not going to be really quick to say, better not take that. In that context, I'd say start with that. And then if you're a believer, then the Lord will give you light, and maybe at some point you'll say, I don't think I can do this, or I don't think I should be doing this, or I think there's something better for me to do. Would I encourage any of you to go take a job hauling for City Beverage? I think you already know you can do better than that, right? So, I guess I still kind of get back to it that making money is permission to play, whether that's a business or your job. So we are assuming that makes money, that what you're doing makes money. I think that there are, I still am kind of willing to say that I think there are other factors that we should consider in that. And I didn't give, okay, I'm about my first point out of 5 here. Let me just try to quickly wrap this up with also one that's not going to be very balanced if I just give this one side of it. And I'm running a huge risk in doing this, but it's the next set of questions. What do I do with my clicker here? I think it's just the next set of slides here. Can you click me over there, Josh? It's the next 3 questions. What is the role of joy, or I'd say fulfillment, in the work itself? What is the role of sacrifice in vocation? And what is the role of gifting and natural or developed ability? I'm kind of putting all those together. And here I'm just admitting that to answer this question, I'm going to ask, who am I talking and I'm sticking my neck out here again, but if I'm talking to young people, teens and maybe 20s, I'm going to have an answer that sounds a little bit like this. Don't look for joy in your work as a confirmation that you're doing the right thing. Joy may come, and in fact, it's probable that it will come in some form, maybe not quite like you expected it, but in some form, at least in small ways. But what's more important than that is obedience. Learn to serve, to love, to sacrifice. Learn to value people, to value hard work, and tenacity, and perspiration. Embrace the character that develops from getting up earlier than you want to get up, working longer than you want to work, doing work that you're tired of, and doing it all day, day after day, week after week, year after year. Look for the joy in the character that God is refining in you. Look for the joy from God's smile about your faithfulness. Now, if you happen to be in a job that you really enjoy, don't feel guilty about that. It's great when God gives that, but just know that it isn't always going to be your experience, and it isn't everybody's experience. Now, that's not a direct answer to Daryl's question, but I would say that, sometimes character development is what God's doing in the work you've got. Moses was in the wilderness for 40 years, and I don't think he saw that as being his primary calling. I got to stop there. There was more I wish I could say, but continue the discussion. How's that? And I'd be just very happy to engage with you on some of these kinds of questions as we have a chance. All right, no moderator, so I guess here we are. We're gonna just close the service here. And Anthony, could you speak up loudly enough to pray without a mic there? Why don't we stand for a closing prayer?
Father, we pray that as we go about our various vocations, we pray that you would help us to find joy and fulfillment in the places that you called us to. Help us to remain open to your voice of leading, whether that's staying in our vocations or choosing something different. We pray for your direction.